Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. So in today's installation video, it's time to work on my 4th gen Tacoma. I will be installing the 6-element front-mounted intercooler. This is also compatible for the 4Runner and the Land Cruiser with the 4-cylinder turbo. So take a look at the link down in the description below where you can get this for your own vehicle. Now with this intercooler, this is going to help the turbo spool quicker. It's also going to cool down the intake temperatures better than the factory intercooler. Now I'll also have a video down in the description below where you can see me take the whole front end of this vehicle off in the factory form. I do have an aftermarket front bumper, so there's a little bit more work that I have to do, but in general, it will be the same process to remove the entire front end in order to gain access to the factory intercooler. Now with this model here, it retains the OEM width. It adds 11 millimeters in height, 16 millimeters in thickness, which results in a 9% bump in the frontal area and 16% more internal volume. It will also add just over 15 horsepower and 14 pound-feet of torque, and I have this now combined with my 6-element intake. So the truck sounds good. It will be more efficient with this intercooler as well. Now I've also gone ahead and done all of the factory testing. So at the end of this video, we'll see all the temperatures with the factory intercooler and then compare it to the 6-element intercooler and see the improvements and efficiencies with this new mod. So step one in this process, to gain access to the front, you're going to want to remove half of your fender flare. So in the front of the fender liner, you will have 10 millimeter bolts. They're going to look like this, and I would recommend removing 3 of them. So you have one in that lower section, you have one just underneath this curve here, and then there's a third one up top here. Now, if you can't pop this off far enough from the vehicle, just go ahead and start removing more of the screws. But I think 3 is going to give you enough room to wiggle this out. Now, along with these 3 bolts, there's also 2 tabs that are holding the inside of the fender liner to the fender flare itself. You can use a flathead to pop those out. Mine are already out just from the modifications that I've done. But from there, once you remove the carpeting, there is a tab located on the back side of this fender flare. And so if you can get your finger in there, you can pop that tab out because it is a little bit stuck on the back side. But once you can kind of loosen that, and it'll pop out just like that. So you can pull the tabs right out. And with this popped out, it is pretty flexible, so you can bend it slightly because there is a Phillips head screw located just behind it. So you can remove that on both sides, of course, and that is going to loosen up this upper corner. And then underneath the bumper, you do have to remove 2 bolts. They're both 10 millimeters as well. The first one that you're removing is for the inner fender liner cover here. So this carpeting. Once you remove that, you gain access to this second 10 millimeter bolt, and this is what actually holds the bumper to the vehicle itself. From there, I'm going to work my way to the back section of the grille. So with the grille, you'll notice there's a 10 mil right there. We have one in the middle, one on this far side. You do have to disconnect this right here, so just give it a good pinch and you can easily remove that. And then there's also some of these push pins. So if you just push them down in the middle, you can easily remove those with your fingers, and then you'll just reset it basically by popping that back out, and then you can place it back in when ready. So we can have that free. There's also one on this side, so it's just attaching that panel to the back of the grille there, and then by removing these 2 bolts here, we can slowly start to loosen the upper section of the grille. And then you also have 2 connections that you have to disconnect on the passenger side. So you have one on the top here, one in the middle. They are different sizes and shapes, so you know which one goes where. There's a third one down below, but you don't have to worry about that because that one is not connecting to the vehicle. So from there, we have the upper grille here basically loose. And then what you'll need to do is get a hand back here because we will be pulling this corner away from the bottom of the light. So if you want to remove this further, you can, just to get a little bit more access in popping it out. But you can, at least I've done this already once, so that was a little bit easier. There's also 2 that actually hold this to the vehicle itself. You'll notice there was one right here that I removed, so it's up against this bracket here, and then one right here against that bracket. The rest of them are going to be for the air dam there, and it's just a matter of wiggling the bumper off from here. So first up, we need to remove all of the plastic here, all of these shields, and all of them are going to have either that push pin that I mentioned earlier, where you can just push it and then remove it easily, or some of these will have this lip here, where I will have to take my flathead and just pop them out like so, and then you can remove them from there. Keep track of all these, of course, and where they go back into place, so that way you don't lose any of them. And so our goal with removing the intercooler right here is to get this bracket out of the way. So this body colored piece that goes side to side. In order to remove that, we have the hood latch bracket along with the horn system on both sides, and then this metal pipe right here. So we need to disassemble this so that way we can get to these 2 bolts on this side and then 2 on this left side here in order to remove that. So these are all going to be either a 10 or a 12 millimeter. So I'm going to work on sliding this piece out and then kind of just let it hang out right here. And I'm just going to strap it up so that way it doesn't fall any farther away from the vehicle. Because with that kind of just hanging out of the way, I can gain access to the next step, which is these 6 bolts. So you'll see these 3 circles on this side, and then there's 3 mimicking it on the other side. This is a 12 millimeter socket, and they're pretty far in there, but at least you can see them through the back side here. So just be careful that, of course, they don't come out and you lose them, but it looks like we have easy access to grab all of them. We are one step closer now to removing this factory intercooler. We have 4 more bolts to go. There's one in the lower right. There's also one behind here. So you'll see it's right there. There's also one on this left side and then one in the lower section. And these are holding the intercooler to the radiator itself. So it turns out I have a 10 millimeter where I could remove this if I wanted to, but it just saved me a little bit of work. I did use this smaller wrench to get this lower right bolt. There's literally no room for this to work. So you have to be very tedious with the smaller 10 millimeter socket there. And as you can tell now, I do have this strap to the hood for the intercooler and radiator itself, because I can slowly, hopefully, start to lift this up off those brackets for those lower bolts in order to reach the top bolts. However, I do think I can at least reach the bolts, but they're so long, there's not enough clearance to get them out. So I will loosen them first by hand, and then I will have to slowly raise this whole assembly up in order to get the rest of the bolt out. And then before you start removing the factory intercooler, you do have to reach around and disconnect it from these tubes. Now on this driver's side, there's this plug that you need to disconnect, and then with this clamp system, there's these 2 pins on both sides. Basically, this loops around the entire section. You want to push them as far out as possible, and then you can wiggle that pipe and pop it off. Now on this passenger side, especially with my aftermarket intake here, it's a little bit in the way, but you can actually reach through the front up underneath and you will detach the same clamp, but there's also 2 of these attached to it. So I'm going to leave both of them on and then just slowly wiggle this out from the front to get better access to reach back here to disconnect those 2 tubes. Oh, there we go. Whew, wow. We need to transfer all of the parts from this factory one. So I'm starting off with the bushings here, where I removed the metal sleeve from the inside. So just taking that out, and then I'm just going to match it to the new side. So I can take the rubber bushing and place it in, and then once that's in, put the metal sleeve back in. So there's 2 to do on this side. And with that side done, we also have this cap. So that's just holding it from anything going in. So I'll just place it onto the factory one now. We also have another cap that I can just transfer back. And then on the opposite side, we do have this sensor, which is one of the plugs that I removed. So we'll carefully unthread it out and then place it right into the new one. And then we can thread this one right in place, and then I'll also just transfer this cap too back to the factory one, so that way I can store this one and it can be nice and protected. So now let's reverse that entire process and install our new intercooler. So that actually wasn't that bad. I did end up removing that top crossmember piece in order to get a little bit of access, and then I put this side in first and just wiggled it as much as I could to line it up with that side. So that is pretty much the hard part. Now it's time for the reassembly of everything. Hopefully you have all your bolts laid out correctly so you can reinstall everything. So let's button this up and then move on to our before and after testing with this new intercooler. So after all of that testing, I've done about 20 miles of driving, going through the heat soaking, all of the cycles, getting the temperatures up to temperature. This is the intake temp. We're at 96.8, which is about 28 degrees over ambient, roughly 68, 69 degrees outside. And while I'm going uphill slightly on the accelerator, we're at 75.2 degrees. So it cooled down pretty quickly, but now it's time to see how much more efficient this new intercooler will cool down. We'll see what the temperatures are, both after the heat soaking, of course, and then how quickly it can cool down once we start moving again. Okay, so for the big numbers for today's video with the 6-element intercooler, ambient temperature is a little bit warmer today. It's 72 degrees. I've gone through the entire heat cycle, heat soaking. I've done about the same amount of mileage. I've been driving for about the same amount of time as the previous test. So intake temperature is at 93.2. all said and done. So all of the driving that I'm doing, I've just been idling for the last 5 minutes, and the vehicle has been on and running for the entire duration, just like the previous test. And as we make it to the last uphill, we've made it to 77 degrees for this intercooler temperature, 75.2. It is dipping with the ambient temperature being 73. Very impressive to see. It seems to be holding right above 75 degrees. So after all the testing now, let's go over and recap these numbers. With the stock intercooler, after all of the driving, getting it as hot as possible for the city driving that I did, ambient temperature was 28 degrees over. After a quick cool down, it made it to 7.2 degrees over ambient. With the 6th element intercooler, after all of the driving tests, we were at 21.2 degrees above ambient, and then after a quick drive to cool down, it made it to 3 degrees above ambient temperature. Now, it doesn't seem like a significant difference. It's definitely an improvement to see with the space provided up front for the intercooler. There's not much room to go bigger, so they basically maximized the amount of space to make the intercooler as large as possible. This is not a sports car. There's not a lot of room up front, where some other vehicles you can have 2 or 3 times the size of an aftermarket intercooler to install up front. So for the sizing, without having to modify the vehicle to cut anything to try to stuff in something even larger, this is basically as big as you can go with the 4th gen Toyota Tacoma. And so to see differences like that is still very impressive. The factory one looked to do a decent job, but we can get even more efficiency now with this little bit larger intercooler system. Now, this is a vehicle that I use for towing. So I tow about 6,000 pounds with this truck, and I would be very interested to see over longer hauls, driving with 6,000 pounds, 45, 50 minutes, doing some highway driving, longer trips. We will start to see a little bit more of a difference with the intercooler temperatures, factory versus this aftermarket one. So around town, if we're already seeing this difference, it will increase the longer you drive this, the hotter it gets, the hotter outside air temperature is as well. We're right at 74 degrees at this moment now. So I would have liked to do this when the outside temperature is in the 90s, 100 degrees. Hopefully we would see an even bigger increase in cooling the vehicle and getting some more efficiency. So with the testing that I've been able to do, it is impressive to see for the slightly larger size the intercooler is over the factory one and what these temperatures are providing us already. So I hope you all enjoyed today's full installation review and the outcome with this latest intercooler for my Turbo Tacoma. If you enjoyed today's video, give it a huge thumbs up. Take a look at the link down in the description below where you can purchase this product, and consider smashing that subscribe button so you can not only stay up to date with the rest of the build for this Tacoma, but with our daily uploads as well. And I will see you all in the next video.